What is going on, everybody? It's the Reformation Keegan, and I'm here today with a brand new analysis. So, today we're going to be looking at Batman Court of Owls. And I'm going to tentatively call this video part one because there's so much more to analyze. Like, you can do the Night of the Owls as well, but I'm going to focus more on the Court of Owls right now because there's a lot to talk about, and I don't want to make this video overly long because the audience retention for a lot of videos doesn't go past more than a few minutes, and that's just a fact at this point. Because shorts have essentially taken over longer videos. So shorts are usually 60 to 120 seconds, and people just scroll through for what they want, and they're probably doing the same for a lot of videos now that are longer. So I'm trying to not have a lot of my videos proceed 15 minutes because I want that retention for everything that I'm trying to discuss in these videos, because some of it can get very philosophical, can get very in depth, and that will either keep the audience's retention or they're going to be gone within 60 to 120 seconds. Anyway, we're going to be looking at The Court of Owls today by the great Scott Snyder. If you have not checked out any Scott Snyder's other work, he's currently writing the Absolute Batman series right now, which I believe is already penciled in for 28 consecutive issues as we speak, and we're heading onto issue 9 featuring Bane. So I want to see where that's going to go. Unfortunately, Bane's not a part of the Court of Owls because the Court of Owls is basically a new character conception that Scott made for the New 52, which has been a very good run, and I'm happy that I started reading it. I'm not done it in full yet. I'm getting there because I'm probably going to do another video analysis on the Death in the Family featuring the Joker. So I'm going to get to that. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Court of Owls. I'm not going to go through the entirety of it in the sense of giving it a review, because I think you guys get a lot of that anyway. Instead, I want to look at the literary aspects of Scott Snyder's work within Batman, Court of Owls. And if you haven't read this, I recommend getting the trade because the first 10 or so issues of the New 52 are usually pretty expensive. So they can range between $30 to $60, especially the first 5 or 6 issues of the Court of Owls. They can get quite pricey depending on the grade. So I recommend getting the trades, as I have for all of the New 52. But I wanted to start by talking a little bit about like Scott Snyder's prose, a little bit about what's happening in this story, because the Court of Owls is a new conception. So I got to give Scott an A+ for creativity in the story. It's something new, something innovative, and sometimes with Batman, you would think that you're running out of ideas, but then once you think you're running out of ideas, you come up with a million more. There's so much you can do with vigilante and detective stories, and I think Scott Snyder has really mastered that, as seen in the New 52. But I wanted to start a little bit with Scott's prose. So like you have at the beginning, and I always have my notes, and if you are someone who's presenting and stuff, do not be afraid to use notes because everybody does. You can't memorize everything. So he uses the question and phrase "Gotham is," and then you put in your own parentheses for the ... to make it like Gotham is what, right? So that's a literary strategy used to create a sense of repetition, to get a phrase, for lack of a better term, more common with the audience's perception going forward of the story. And it's central to the text, because Bruce says, that his father Thomas says that tomorrow is one dream away. So we can see at the beginning of this story that quote is pretty evident, because you have Bruce coming in almost being like a humanitarian of some sort, looking after Gotham. So Bruce looks at Gotham during the day as a project, and then he looks to solve that project at night by being the Dark Knight, aka Batman. So that's a really nice way to start this, and to get the suspense and mystery going forward, because Gotham is always usually very dark and very brooding, and I think Scott does a really good job at portraying this through his prose. And he has Harvey Bullock call to Bruce to look at an ID'd man that has unfortunately now passed on. And Batman finds that there are throwing knives that have created incisions within now the Decedent. And the knives used have like human leftovers on it, right? And there's also a face of an owl. And there's a message that says Bruce Wayne will die tomorrow. So immediately from the get-go, we have our conflict. And Scott establishes this conflict in book 1. Sometimes comics do this thing where they want to capture long-term storytelling, so they keep teasing it book after book after book, and then eventually, if you do it for too long, because you can do it, you just have to know how to do it properly. But if you let it ride for too long, the audience is going to get bored, and they're going to think that they're wasting their money because you're giving them a bunch of, for lack of a better term, empty stories. So Scott, right from the get-go, gives us this semblance of mystery by saying Bruce Wayne will die tomorrow, and then bam, next book. Because then that's going to rhetorically make you want to know what's going to happen next. And you want to know, okay, we already know somewhat of the conflict, but who is the conflict? And when you're looking at literature, you have to look at the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And so far, we have basically the what and the where, but we don't have the who, the why, and the how. So you're getting little tidbits of it at the same time. So there's a little bit of simultaneity going on in the text. And then also we find in book 2 right away, and I found this extremely interesting, where we started with Bruce getting kicked off of the Wayne Tower, which I thought was awesome. But there's still this semblance of mystery because we find out later in book 2 what the mystery is, or who the mystery is. And we find out that it's the assassin. The assassin, aka the Talon, is the big mystery man revealed. And Batman basically tells Gordon that he thinks that the Court of Owls is a myth. So Scott is already introducing mythology as well. And you have to be very careful with mythology because you can undermine the intelligence of your own reader, and the reader might feel insulted at that. So that does happen a lot when you're getting into stuff that's very ideological and very mythological, because you are taking a gamble on the education of your audience. And for Batman, it's a nice risk that I think has a high reward, because with Batman, you don't just want criminals of the underworld, you want something else that adds a little more dynamic, and I think this mythological dynamic adds a ton. So Scott does a great job doing this throughout the entire arc of the Court of Owls. And then he also adds the mythology with the mysticism, where you have Bruce, who is so intelligent, but at the same time, he's almost a bit impressionable. And I find that really, really unique, because you often don't have Bruce being impressionable and thinking that things are a myth or denouncing things, because Bruce knows everything about Gotham. Batman knows everything about Gotham. So if there's one thing that Batman doesn't know, he's almost taken the insult by that. And Batman doesn't know about the Court of Owls. He thinks that they're a myth, and he thinks that they are an underground society that is basically non-existent. So the fact that Batman doesn't really know what is happening in Gotham says a lot, and that's also a really big risk by Scott that I think is indicative of a high reward by the conclusion of this story, because Bruce always is keeping tabs on everything in the Gotham underworld and also during the daytime in Gotham. So for him to kind of not know what's happening, and we can see this when the Court of Owls are basically within the walls of Wayne Manor, and Wayne Manor being cursed, he doesn't really know any of that, and that's very unique, to have Bruce almost be outsmarted unintentionally. So I really like that, because that's almost a form of dramatic irony that Scott gives us that is very indicative when you're looking at Bruce's situation and his dilemma, and seeing how he doesn't know it, but then we know it, and that kind of makes us as the audience feel more credible in the eyes of the canon of the character. And then we get a little bit more mystery too. So we have who we call John Doe in this. That's just the default for somebody that we don't know. And they're doing an autopsy on him, and we find Nightwing's DNA under his fingernails. And then we find out later that Nightwing was actually approached by this man, and this man was warning him that they're coming. And there's a lot more mysticism with Nightwing in this story that I think is really, really good. Because originally Nightwing was going to be the heir to the next Talon. So he was going to become another Talon, and kind of become the Golden Goose. And that's a really unique dilemma to have that Scott uses, because we know Dick Grayson as being the inexperienced Robin that becomes a badass in the form of Nightwing. And to look at this from a hypothetical perspective is intriguing. And I think Scott uses hypothetical reasoning a lot in this story that I think sometimes, again, you have to be careful because you don't want to undermine the knowledge of your own audience. But if you can write it in the way that Scott does, in the way that he leads through it from story to story, it works. But you just really need to know how to do it. And like we have so much more, and then we also find out like that Lincoln March. He warns Bruce. He says, you might need an ally going forward. So that's a really great sense of foreshadowing that happens a little bit later in this book, because Bruce is going to need an ally, even if it's not just Alfred or even Lincoln March himself or Nightwing, but Bruce maybe needs to be his own best ally, as we see in the story with the Labyrinth. And to me, the Labyrinth dilemma was the best part of this entire arc, because how often do you see somebody or a group mess with Bruce's mind to this level other than maybe Hush in the first Hush arc? Because we see Batman losing it, like legitimately losing his mind. And that doesn't happen very often. Batman's usually calm, usually collected. He's a detective. He's going to be calculating with his research, all this stuff. But here in the Labyrinth, he becomes utterly unstable. And he's seeing history before his eyes. And then, he sees the portrait of Alan Wayne, and then that's his new lease on life to keep fighting and keep going forward. But he ends up drinking this water that is not necessarily trustworthy, for lack of a better term, because you don't know what this water is that comes out of the owl in the Labyrinth. And I originally thought that this water could have been almost a way to pollute Bruce's mind, which it could still be a viable argument, but I think Bruce was just going through a psychotic break, because when you're in a labyrinth, there's almost no escape. If you remember from Batman the Animated Series, when he's basically in one with the Riddler, you can see Bruce kind of unravel. So when Bruce is in a maze that he knows he can't solve, that's when you start to see the mental dilemma come forward. And it was very interesting how this was done, because you see Bruce, like he's like almost becoming like a werewolf, like he's getting canine teeth and the beard's coming out, and he's just so grizzled, his eyes popping out, so he's legitimately losing his mind, because almost nobody can mess with Bruce's mind in this kind of way. And this is, I think, where a lot of mythology and mysticism comes in. And you can see that there's almost like a wall of fame of everybody that the Court of Owls has gotten, and then they're going to sentence him to die, and there's a way where Bruce is going to be honored through death, and they're going to almost keep him like a trophy, which I thought was really unique, because often death and honor in today's day and age don't really coincide. But if you're going back to the Middle Ages, there is an honor in death. And even if you do take somebody out and take their life, there's an honor to that, to still give them the benefit of the doubt and show their chivalry and their nobility in the process. So I thought that was a nice little historical background that Scott Snyder also used here. And I thought it worked really well. But I really liked this mental health aspect of Bruce losing his mind. But then when he sees Alan Wayne on the picture looking at with that face of panic, that turns everything around. And sometimes you need that one visual aspect to change your mind. And this is where visual imagery also comes in, that Scott Snyder uses to a T. And it's funny too, because with Batman and with Nightwing, they're both simultaneous characters in the sense that there's always a duality with their actions and what they're doing and how they're doing it. And Bruce not realizing that the Court of Owls has been really running Gotham through the shadows since colonial times is really indicative. And I like that aspect of Scott adding colonial times, because it gives Gotham this sense of history that we don't always see. And I know that there's a new story of Gotham Year One out, which I actually have in trade. But we don't always get the whole history of Gotham. We get little tidbits here, but we get a nice little history through the lens of the Court of Owls of Gotham. So obviously, like Gotham is also claimed to be a city predicated off a superstition. And it's almost like everybody believed the superstition of the Court of Owls except for Bruce. But it turns out that the superstition was actually accurate and true. And Bruce was actually incorrect in his own analysis. So Bruce now has to make up for the incorrection of his own analysis to take out the Court of Owls. And like the other thing that I found unique too was Alfred basically stated the obvious in this book, where owls are the predator to bats, and Batman feared bats. That's why he became Batman. But, or one of the reasons anyway. But the fact that Batman, through a mental break and through fear, has to become the predator when he's really the prey. Fantastic storytelling here, especially through Scott's prose, like I mentioned. But there's so much to speak about on this story. That's why I think I have to do a part 2 eventually. But I want to see what the reception is going to be for part 1, because there's so much we can say about it. And then there's there's a lot of really good flashbacks in here too that we see, where you can see where Nightwing is told to not let his emotions kind of be the cause of things, and that's where Bruce kind of has to take that bigger brother, fatherly figure role. So because we know that Robin, as the form of Dick Grayson, was very impulsive, but Nightwing has to be a little more calculating, and that's where Batman has to take on that leadership ability. Throughout his own mental dilemmas, he still has to take this leadership ability, which I found was a really nice touch. But also too, like, Batman being gone for 8 days shows how much Gotham is relying on him and how much Commissioner Gordon is relying on him. So they have to kind of figure out how to do things on their own while Batman is stuck in the labyrinth for 8 consecutive days. And I found that was a really nice, strong analysis there from Scott to show the identity of Gotham without Batman being omnipresent in it. So there was so much going on in this story. So much flashbacks, so many little intricate details in constituents, but I think like I said, I'm gonna have to do a part 2 on this because there's so much to discuss, and I don't want this video to go too long. But I think eventually I'm gonna do more on this one, because I still have some notes here, and I'm trying to see like everything that I wanted to tackle. But there's so much more that we can discuss. But I think I discussed some big portions of it today. So if you want to see a part 2, let me know. And I would like to do more of these analyses. I'm going to do some more Batman ones coming forward, and still stick to Superman, obviously. And then we're going to get into some more Marvel and DC stuff going forward, because I have a lot of trades on the Flash, on the Green Arrow. Maybe I'll do Gotham City Year 1 sooner rather than later. And then we'll go from there. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you think of this analysis. This was just me trying to avoid giving you a whole summary in a review, because you see a lot of that anyway. But I wanted to really dig deep into what Scott Snyder was trying to do here, because his writing is very complex in the best of ways. I'm a massive fan of his work. I'd love to meet him one day, and talk to him about some of these things, because as someone who's a master's student right now, I love researching different writing styles and researching the proverbial method to the madness of the writer, and also, here's a paradox, a madness to the method. So I'm hoping to write some stuff on my own eventually, comics-wise. The only thing I'm trying to find is an artist that can be complementary with me, and one where we can work together on a story, because I do have some ideas going forward, and hopefully I can publish a few, because it's definitely a huge goal of mine. As many of you know, I'm a professional wrestler, but my other dream is to write comics as well, and some novels. So hopefully we can keep that going, and people like Scott Snyder are an inspiration for that. So let me know what you guys think. Like, share, and comment. Most of all, hit that subscribe button. We're almost to 500, and I want to get 3,000 watch hours so then I can become a YouTube partner, and then that way we can put together more videos, and we can collaborate together on here, and we can also put on a better product of quality of videos too. And, I can get some better video editing, video software, and we can make this look even more professional. So let me know what you guys think of that, and I will see you soon. I'm going to be doing some more shorts today for some comic pickups I have made. So see you then.